I need a job, Sarah. Anything you can offer. Richard Green's words hung in the air of my elegant corner office. 6 months earlier, this same man had fired me over Zoom in a 3-minute call that ended my 7-year career at Vertex Solutions. Now he sat hunched forward in one of my visitor chairs, his expensive suit failing to mask the desperation in his posture. The transparency systems you implemented at Vertex revealed. He hesitated, discrepancies in my management decisions. The board wasn't pleased. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very system proposal that had gotten me terminated was now the instrument of his downfall. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Mitchell Consulting Group's downtown Fort Lauderdale office, I could see my team working, many of them former Vertex employees who had followed me into this new venture. I need this, Sarah, Richard added, desperation creeping into his voice. I have alimony payments, a mortgage. 6 months ago, I was the one reeling from shock, staring at a black screen after being discarded without a proper conversation. Now I was the one with power. The universe has a strange sense of humor sometimes. Flashback, the firing. 6 months earlier, I had been sitting in my home office when those fateful words came through my laptop speakers. Your attitude doesn't fit our culture, Richard Green said, his voice flat and emotionless. We're going to have to let you go, effective immediately. I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process what was happening. Just yesterday, I had presented a comprehensive plan to improve our project management system, a plan that would increase efficiency and transparency across the company. Richard, I don't understand, I managed to say. My proposal was about improving workflow. The decision is final, Sarah. His eyes darted away from the camera. Human Resources will send you the necessary paperwork. Please return any company property by the end of the week. Before I could respond, he clicked End Meeting, and my screen went black. I sat frozen, staring at my reflection in the dark screen. 7 years of dedication to Vertex Solutions. Countless late nights ensuring projects were delivered on time. Client relationships I had carefully nurtured. All ended with a 3-minute Zoom call. At 40, with 2 children depending on me, I suddenly found myself unemployed. My fingers traced the edge of the notebook where I jotted down the key points of my presentation. Next to it, my phone vibrated with messages from concerned colleagues who had already heard the news. My daughter Emma's school portrait smiled at me from its frame on my desk. I'd missed her band recital last month because I was fixing a crisis for Vertex, one of many family moments sacrificed for a company that had just discarded me without a second thought. Mom? Jake's voice startled me as my 13-year-old son appeared in the doorway. Are you okay? You look weird. I forced a smile. Just a tough work call, honey. Dad's making pasta for dinner, he said, lingering. He said to tell you it'll be ready in 20 minutes. As Jake disappeared down the hallway, a knot formed in my throat. How would I tell Mark and the kids? What would this mean for our mortgage, for Emma's college fund? But instead of panic, a strange calm settled over me as I opened my laptop again and created a new document. At the top, I typed, Mitchell Consulting Group, Business Plan. The early years, I had always been the problem solver, the fixer. When I joined Vertex Solutions 7 years ago, they were a struggling project management firm, barely staying afloat in a competitive market. Their processes were outdated, their client communication was inconsistent, and their reputation was suffering. Within my first year, I had completely restructured their workflow systems, implemented regular client check-ins, and developed custom solutions for their 3 biggest accounts. Richard, who had just been promoted to Chief Operations Officer back then, took credit for most of my innovations during executive meetings, but I didn't mind. I believed in the work, not the recognition. You're invaluable, Sarah, he would say after I salvaged yet another project that had been mismanaged from the start. The clients trust you. It was true. While Richard and the other executives wined and dined potential clients with grand promises, I was the one building relationships based on actually delivering on those promises. Robert Davison from Trixico once told me, I don't care who's officially in charge, we know you're the one making things happen. Similar sentiments were echoed by Catherine Morrison at North Peak Engineering and Thomas Wilson at Borealis Capital. My husband Mark had been telling me for years that I was undervalued at Vertex. You're carrying that company on your shoulders, he would say as I worked late nights fixing problems I hadn't created. One day, you should strike out on your own. I always dismissed the idea. Mark, with his psychology professor's salary, had a stable career with reasonable hours. Meanwhile, I had job security, a decent salary, and I was making a difference, even if it wasn't always recognized. Besides, with two children to support, starting over seemed daunting and risky. What I was only beginning to realize was how the company culture had been slowly deteriorating. The focus had shifted from client satisfaction to executive bonuses. My proposed system would have brought all of this into the light, making it impossible to hide the inefficiencies I had been quietly compensating for over the years. In retrospect, I should have seen Richard's reaction coming. My proposal wasn't just an improvement. It was a threat to the status quo that benefited him and his inner circle. A new beginning. The morning after my termination, I woke up with a strange sense of lightness. Mark brought me coffee in bed, his face a mixture of concern and anger on my behalf. I still can't believe they fired you through a video call, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. After everything you've done for them. The funny thing is, I said, taking a sip of coffee, I'm not even upset anymore. I'm relieved. Relieved? Mark's eyebrows shot up. Yes, relieved. I've been compensating for their mismanagement for years, covering up their mistakes, working around their egos. I set down my mug and met his eyes. I'm exhausted, Mark. I could see him processing this. As a psychology professor, Mark had always been my emotional barometer, sensing shifts in my mood before I could articulate them myself. So what are you going to do? He asked finally. I reached for my laptop and showed him the business plan I'd stayed up half the night creating. I'm going to start my own consulting firm. Do what I've always done, but on my terms. Mark scanned the document, his expression shifting from surprise to excitement. You're serious about this? Completely serious, I confirmed. I've already secured the domain name and started outlining service packages. Mom starting a business? Emma appeared in the doorway, her 16-year-old curiosity piqued. Jake peered around her shoulder, his eyes wide. I might be, I said, gesturing for them to join us on the bed. What would you think about that? Would you work from home? Jake asked immediately. Like, be here when we get back from school? The question pierced my heart. How many times had my children come home to an empty house because I was working late at Vertex? Some days, yes, I said carefully. It would be different. I'd have more control over my schedule, but I'd also have more responsibility. Will we be okay? Emma asked, the practical one as always. Money-wise, I mean. There's some risk, I admitted. But I've been saving, and your dad has his job. We'll be careful with expenses for a while. As the kids headed downstairs for breakfast, Mark wrapped his arm around my shoulders. They believe in you, he said quietly. We all do. The first clients. I spent the rest of the morning sending emails and making phone calls. Not to badmouth Vertex or Richard. I was too professional for that. But to let my contacts know about my career transition. By lunchtime, my inbox was filling with responses. Former colleagues expressing shock at my departure, industry contacts offering connections, and most surprisingly, an email from Robert Davidson at Trixico. Heard about your departure from Vertex. Let's talk ASAP. I called him immediately. Sarah, he said when he picked up. What the hell happened? I gave him the sanitized version, a difference in vision for the company's future. Robert wasn't buying it. Richard finally realized you were the one keeping everything together, didn't he? Got threatened? I couldn't say. I replied diplomatically. Well, his loss, Robert continued. Listen, we have 3 major projects scheduled with Vertex for the next quarter, but frankly, you were the only reason we stayed with them. If you're going independent, we'd rather work directly with you. I felt a flutter of excitement mixed with trepidation. That's a significant offer, Robert. It's a no-brainer for us. Your strategic approach has saved us countless hours and resources. Send me a proposal by the end of the week. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence. Then my phone rang again. It was Catherine Morrison from North Peak Engineering with essentially the same message. By the end of the day, Thomas Wilson from Borealis Capital had also called. Three of Vertex's biggest clients, representing nearly 40% of their quarterly revenue, were ready to follow me out the door. That night, as I updated my business plan with this unexpected development, I realized that what Richard had intended as punishment had instead become my liberation. Building the team. 1 week after my termination, Mitchell Consulting Group was officially established. I had converted our guest bedroom into a proper office, complete with a professional setup for video calls. Mark had surprised me with a custom nameplate for my desk. Sarah Mitchell, founder and CEO. I was in the middle of finalizing my proposal for Trixico when my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Amber Collins, Vertex's HR director. "Sarah," she said when I answered, her voice unusually tentative. "How are you?" "I'm doing well, Amber. What can I do for you?" "Well, Richard asked me to reach out. There seems to be some confusion with a few of our clients. They're requesting to terminate their contracts." I leaned back in my chair. "And you're calling me because they've specifically mentioned my name?" Richard thought perhaps I might have influenced their decision. "Richard can be reactive," Amber said carefully. I had always suspected she disagreed with many of the executive decisions but kept her opinions to herself to protect her job. She had a son with special needs and couldn't afford employment gaps. "But yes, he's concerned about the timing." I chose my words carefully. "I've started my own consulting firm, which I'm legally entitled to do. I haven't violated any non-compete clauses, as Vertex doesn't have them. If clients are making business decisions, that's their prerogative." There was a pause on the line. "Would you consider coming back? Richard is prepared to offer you a significant raise and a new title." The offer caught me by surprise, but it only took a moment to find my answer. "I appreciate the offer, Amber, but I've already committed to a new path." The following day, I received a message from Michael Kim, one of Vertex's senior project managers and someone I had worked closely with for years. "Need to talk. Can I call you?" I agreed, and when Michael called, he sounded like he was speaking in hushed tones. "Things are chaotic here," he said. After those three clients pulled out, Richard called an emergency meeting. "He's blaming everyone but himself." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely concerned for my former colleagues. "Don't be sorry. You should see the looks on the executives' faces. They finally realized who was actually keeping the clients happy." Michael paused. "Listen, several of us are thinking about jumping ship. Would you be interested in bringing on some experienced team members?" I hadn't planned on expanding so quickly, but having a trusted team would allow me to take on more clients sooner. "Send me their resumes," I told him. By the end of the second week, Mitchell Consulting Group had grown to include Michael and two other former Vertex employees: Elena Rodriguez, a talented data analyst and single mother, and Jason Taylor, a skilled client relations manager in his early 50s who had been increasingly sidelined at Vertex in favor of younger employees. Growing pains. 3 months into running Mitchell Consulting Group, we had already outgrown our small office space. With a client list that was expanding weekly and a team that now included 7 former Vertex employees, I was looking at larger offices and considering our long-term growth strategy. But success came at a price I hadn't fully anticipated. Despite my promises to be more present for my family, I found myself working longer hours than ever. The morning I missed making Jake's lunch for a science field trip, something I had specifically promised to do, I saw the disappointment in his eyes that mirrored what I had seen too often during my Vertex days. "It's okay, Mom," he said with forced cheerfulness. Dad made it instead. "I'm so sorry, honey," I said, rushing to gather my presentation materials for a client meeting. "This new contract came in yesterday and I had to prepare." "It's fine," he cut me off. "I get it. Your business is important." As he headed out the door, Mark gave me a look that said everything without words. I was falling into the same patterns, despite my best intentions. That evening, I canceled a client dinner and came home early. I found Mark grading papers at the kitchen table. "Where are the kids?" I asked, setting down my laptop bag. "Emma's at band practice. Jake's upstairs, probably playing that space game." I hesitated. "Are you mad at me?" Mark sighed and removed his reading glasses. Not mad, concerned. You're building something amazing, Sarah. But you're also rebuilding the same walls between you and the family that you had at Vertex. That's not fair, I protested. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew he was right. I'm trying to establish the business. Once things stabilize, things never just stabilize, Mark said gently. There's always another client, another crisis, another opportunity you can't pass up. You have to actively create boundaries. I sank into a chair across from him. I don't know how to do this, Mark. When I worked for someone else, I could blame them for the demands on my time. Now it's all on me. Which means you have the power to change it, he said, reaching across to take my hand. Structure your company the way you want the world to be, not the way Vertex was. Later that week, I called a team meeting. We need to talk about work-life balance, I announced. Starting with mine, which is currently non-existent, but extending to all of yours. I outlined a new approach, core hours when we would all be available for meetings, but flexibility beyond that. Technology that would allow remote work when needed for family obligations. And most importantly, a culture where taking time for personal needs wasn't just permitted but encouraged. I'm building this company because I believe we can deliver exceptional results for our clients while still having full, balanced lives, I said. If we can't do both, then what's the point? The turning point. One evening, as I was wrapping up for the day, Michael stepped into my office with an unusual expression on his face. You're going to want to see this, he said, placing his tablet on my desk. It was an industry newsletter with the headline, Vertex Solutions announces restructuring amid client exodus. The article detailed how the company had lost over 50% of its client base in just 12 weeks and was now laying off nearly a third of its staff. Richard's been demoted, Michael added. The board finally stepped in. I skimmed the article, feeling a complex mix of emotions. I hadn't set out to damage Vertex. I had simply created something better. There's more, Michael said, taking back the tablet and navigating to another page. Look who's reaching out. It was a LinkedIn message from William Stevens, Vertex's CEO. Sarah, I think we need to talk. The board has some questions about the systems you developed while at Vertex, and frankly, we could use your insights. Would you be open to a consultation? The meeting was set for the following week at Vertex's headquarters. When I arrived, the atmosphere was noticeably different. The reception area was quieter, with fewer employees hurrying about. William greeted me himself, looking worn and humbled. Thank you for coming, Sarah, he said, leading me to the conference room. I appreciate your willingness to talk. In the conference room, I was surprised to find not only William, but also 3 board members. Richard was conspicuously absent. Before we begin, William said once we were all seated, I want to apologize for how your departure was handled. It was unprofessional and, as we've now realized, extremely short-sighted. The board wanted to hire Mitchell Consulting Group to implement the systems I had originally proposed. It was a substantial project that would require significant resources from my growing company, but also a vindication of my vision. The contract with Vertex turned out to be just the beginning. As news spread that Mitchell Consulting Group was now working with the very company that had fired its founder, our credibility in the industry soared. Full circle, 6 months after launching my company, we had moved into a spacious office in a prestigious building in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Our team had grown to 15 employees, most of them specialists I had handpicked for their exceptional skills and client-focused mindset. On the day we signed our 10th major client, I organized a small celebration in the office. As we were raising glasses of champagne to toast our success, my assistant informed me that someone was asking to see me in reception. To my surprise, it was Richard Green. Do you have a minute? He asked, looking uncomfortable in our sleek reception area. The swagger that had once defined him was gone, replaced by a hesitancy that seemed foreign on him. I led him to my office, curious about his unexpected visit. Congratulations on your success, Richard began awkwardly, gesturing at the office around us. You've built something impressive here. Thank you, I replied neutrally. What can I do for you, Richard? He shifted in his seat. I'm not here on behalf of Vertex. I was let go last month. The transparency systems you implemented revealed some discrepancies in my management decisions, he continued, clearing his throat. The board wasn't pleased. I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. The very system he had fired me for proposing had ultimately exposed his mismanagement. Look, Sarah, he said, leaning forward, desperation creeping into his voice. I know I made a mistake with you. I was protecting myself instead of doing what was right for the company. But I'm good at what I do when I have the right guidance. He took a deep breath. I'm here to ask if you might have a position available. The request was so unexpected that for a moment I couldn't respond. Richard Green, the man who had fired me via Zoom without warning or discussion, was asking me for a job. I don't have a position for you, I said at last, watching his face fall. But I do have some contacts in the industry who might make some calls, on one condition. What's that? That you understand what actually happened between us. I wasn't fired because my attitude didn't fit the culture. I was fired because I threatened a system that was benefiting you at the expense of clients and colleagues. Richard had the decency to look ashamed. You're right, and I've paid for that mistake. That evening at home, I recounted the encounter to Mark and the kids over dinner. You're actually going to help him find a job? Emma asked incredulously. After what he did to you? I'm not doing it for Richard, I said finally. I'm doing it for myself. When Richard fired me, he was operating from fear and self-protection. If I refused to help him now for the same reasons, I become what I despised about him. Later that night, I made those calls on Richard's behalf, not because he deserved my help, but because it was the kind of leader I had chosen to be. The acquisition. 1 year after being fired over Zoom, I stood at the podium as the keynote speaker at the annual Project Management Excellence Conference in Miami. From the stage, I could see my team sitting together in the second row. Mark had taken the day off to be there too, his proud smile steadying me. Success isn't just about having the right strategies, I told the audience. It's about implementing them with integrity and transparency. After my speech, William approached me. Your company has captured the imagination of the industry. Everyone wants to know your secret. There is no secret, I replied. Just good work, genuine relationships, and transparent processes. Everything I tried to implement at Vertex. William's expression turned reflective. The board has been discussing a potential acquisition offer. Vertex is still struggling to rebuild its client base, and your systems have only highlighted the structural issues we've ignored for years. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by his candor. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Would Mitchell Consulting Group consider acquiring Vertex Solutions? After careful consideration with my team and family, we moved forward with the acquisition. What began as my personal setback had transformed into a business success story that would be taught in management schools. Richard, who had found a position with a smaller firm thanks to my recommendation, sent me a congratulatory email that read simply, "You built something remarkable from adversity. I'm learning from your example." On the day we finalized the acquisition, I invited the original team members who had joined me in those early days to a private dinner. I never imagined we'd end up here, Michael said, raising his glass. From that tiny office to owning the company that let us go. I looked around the table at the people who had taken a chance on my vision when it was nothing more than a defiant response to being dismissed. I couldn't have done any of this without all of you believing in what we could build together. Later that evening, Mark and I walked along the beach near our home. Are you happy? He asked simply. Yes, I said finally. Not because of the acquisition or the business success, though that's certainly gratifying. I'm happy because I feel aligned, my work reflects my values. I'm present for you and the kids, and I've created something that makes a positive difference. That alignment is rare, Mark said. Many people never find it. I might not have either, if Richard hadn't fired me, I mused. Sometimes I wonder if I should thank him. Mark laughed. I think helping him find a new job was thanks enough. As we turned to head back home, I reflected on the journey. When Richard had ended that Zoom call, cutting me off without the dignity of a proper conversation, he thought he was demonstrating his power. Instead, he had inadvertently launched me into creating something far more significant than I would have otherwise built. Sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised as unfair dismissals.